This might be a hot take, but I'm just gonna say it. Steam has too many games, and they got the bad ones mixed in with the good ones. How can I even tell which is which? So every day for the next week, I'm gonna open Steam and find an obscure game with less than 1,000 reviews and play it until I can't anymore. If that sounds interesting, then stick around, I guess.
The first game is Frontier Hunter, Erza's Wheel of Fortune.
Now, based off that name, you might think this was like a game show or something. It's definitely not that. And I just found in my research that this game is based off of a previous mobile game called Tower Hunter, Erza's Trial, which makes a lot of sense because as I was playing, there was a lot of weird quirks that just weren't explained, like why her hairpin could talk and was very horny, but I see now that there's previous lore that I wasn't privy to. Anyways, the game is basically just a Metroidvania. From the surface, this might just look like one of those cash grab games that just adds anime girls in bikinis, and it is kind of just that. There's also kind of like a good game hidden in it. It's very strange. The combat is pretty vast. There are a lot of moves you can chain together. It's almost like a fighting game at times. There's like quarter circles and shit. There's also a lot of weapons and items and even like an interesting upgrade system, and all the different weapons have different moves and attacks. The enemies are also pretty varied and they also have a lot of different moves, and the movement is pretty good most of the time. There's some moments where it's kind of clunky, but I think most of the time it feels pretty smooth. The story is, I don't get what's going on. Don't ask me, I have no clue. It felt very random, like you fight a werewolf boss, then there's an alien invasion, I don't know. It's also a lot of fan service, which I mean, if you like that, you should probably cop the game. I don't really care, I'm kind of indifferent, but I mean, they probably should have put more effort into the level design than the boob physics and weird cutscenes. The levels do feel very like, they're not quite boring, but I don't know, just moving around them, they all feel very similar. Like it's kind of like they have one thing on this side of the map that you need to get, and you have to go back to the other side, which could just be Metroidvanias in general, but I don't know. I feel like they could have made it a lot more interesting. I do like how you can equip elemental spells and use them out of combat to solve problems, like using a water spell to get rid of a fire. That's pretty cool. The game is definitely weird because there's like a lot of cool things, and you can tell that like it wasn't just thrown together, and there's like some heart and passion in it, but it also kind of looks like it was just thrown together. It is in early access, so maybe when it fully releases it'll be better. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you think it looks cool, play it. If not, I don't know. Don't, I guess. Sea of Stars is a turn-based RPG inspired by some of the classics in the genre, like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy. Now, I've never played those. The only turn-based RPGs I've really played are Pokemon and Mario and Luigi's Inside Story. I tried to play Octopath Traveler once, but I fell asleep. That being said, I was pretty excited for this game. Now that it has arrived though, the question remains, is it a flop or a cop? And after about 9 hours of playing, I think the game is pretty good. In my mind, there's only really 3 reasons you want to play a game like this: the story, the combat, and the exploration. The story seems pretty run-of-the-mill fantasy to me. It's not bad, but it's kind of predictable. I also feel like the music is kind of lackluster. Nothing really stood out to me personally. The combat is pretty good. I'd say there's a lot of interesting moves, and being able to time blocks and attacks is always cool in turn-based games. It just adds another layer of depth, I think. I also think the way you have to strategize on what attacks to use to break enemies' concentration before they cast a spell is pretty cool, and adds a lot of strategy to the game. I don't know if this is like a common mechanic in some RPGs, but I've never seen it before, and I thought it was pretty cool. The game's difficulty I think is very fair for the most part. I feel like a lot of the times when I lose, it's because I didn't plan well enough. There's also some like charms you can use to make the game easier, like there's one that lets you take less damage and makes it so you always like perfect block and attack, but I thought these were kind of like lame and kind of like cheating, so I didn't really use any of them. The exploration is also pretty good, and the world of this game is quite large. There are a lot of areas to explore, and they even kind of encourage you to backtrack and revisit. Like you'll see a weird green cube in one area that you can't interact with, but then later you get a move that lets you interact with the green cube, so then you're like, oh wow, that's what that was for. I should go back and use that. I could easily see it taking like 100+ hours just to find every single secret in this game. So yeah, if any of that sounds enjoyable, you should definitely cop this one. Okay, so the next game I found is called 1-Bit Survivor, and I thought it had a pretty interesting look and premise. You're basically just a guy with a gun who's trying to get his cat to shelter, but there's a bunch of zombies in your way. In each level you have to find the gas can so you can fill your car and escape. It all kind of reminds me of a Flash game you play in like cool math, but I think the music and effects are really cool. They fit the scary atmosphere of the game really well. It's also cool that like whenever you like shoot a gun or do something, it like pops up on the screen like a really detailed version of it. I think that's a nice touch for sure. This game is also a roguelike, which, you know, gives it a lot of replayability. There's different upgrades to your gun and different characters to unlock. As far as difficulty, I thought the game was pretty fair, to be honest. There's a lot of strategy involved though, because the enemies only move when you move, so you kind of got to plan out your routes, and you only have so much ammo, and sometimes a knife will only get you so far, so it makes for some pretty tense moments. Overall, the game's like $4 on Steam, so I think if any of this sounds fun or cool, you should buy it. It's pretty good. Alright, Voidborn is the next game, and let's address the cat in the room. The elephant, it's out of the bag. When I saw Voidborn on Steam, I said, hey, that kinda looks like Ultra Kill. Then I downloaded and played Voidborn, and I said, hey, this is like Ultra Kill. So is Voidborn like Ultra Kill? No, it's actually like Dark Souls. There's some whispers of the story, but I didn't really pay attention to that. The main content of the game is you'll be killing enemies to get stronger upgrades, to go kill stronger enemies and get stronger upgrades, and progress to the next area, where you do that until you run into a boss. Classic roguelike formula. But Voidborn is actually a pretty good game with a few flaws at the moment. I think whenever you buy an early access game, you kinda just gotta accept that it'll be a little unfinished, and you run into the occasional bug. The worst bug I saw was that when I chose an upgrade, there just wouldn't be an upgrade. Like there's supposed to be 3, but I only see 2, and the third one is just kind of bugged. But that was kind of the worst thing I really saw. Other than that, it's a really fun movement shooter. I do think you could use more enemy variations, and I don't think that like having a lot of the bosses just be bigger versions of like previous smaller enemies helps with that. Also, the shotgun is just the best gun in the game, easily. It clears every other gun. Like if you don't use the shotgun, you're basically trolling. Like you're just making the game harder for yourself. The world design is also another plus, because the environments look really cool. Like it's crazy that they made all these things. It looks really nice. I can definitely see this being a very good game once it's all like finished and out of early access. So yeah, keep an eye on it or buy it now. I'm not your dad. Hey man, come here for a second. Do you like Celeste? Me too. And it's kind of hard not to compare other 2D platformers to Celeste, but that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna compare this one to Celeste, because when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, another 2D platformer. That's kind of exciting. But did it live up to my expectations? I don't really know. On one hand, it's a pretty good platformer with some unique ideas. The whole gimmick is basically that the main character, Ava, can swap between dimensions, and the different dimensions have different properties. Like some of them are slippery, some of them have low gravity, some of them have goblins. I think it's a pretty interesting mechanic, and you can like switch freely. Like you can do a double jump then switch dimensions, stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I think the biggest problem for me is that even though they introduce new dimensions quite often, it still gets quite repetitive, because it's still like, I don't know, you're still just jumping around even though you're in a different dimension. I feel like it doesn't really switch up the gameplay that much. I feel like with platformers, you gotta kind of introduce new things a lot, or you're just jumping around and grabbing things a lot at a time. Other than that though, I think the game is okay. Some might say mid. I thought the music was good, that's another plus. And it has a lot of interesting ideas. I think they could have just been pushed a little further, so yeah. You ever wanted to know what it'd be like to be a colonizer? Well boy, do I got the game for you. Yes, Thousand Threads is a game for sure. There's not even particularly anything bad about it. I think the art style is really nice. The sounds kind of throw me off a lot. Like I feel like there's a bit of an issue with the sound design, because like you'll hear a growl really loud, but then like the animal will be really far away. I also didn't mention this, but I played this game for like 3 hours and I forgot to hit record, so I just went back in and ran around. But I hope this will convey a lot of the things that I'm trying to say. I can see a lot of people not liking this game, because I mean, there's not really an objective. You kind of just explore, do what you want, kill who you want, take what you want. I guess that's kind of like Grand Theft Auto in the early 1900s, which is basically just Red Dead Redemption. But I was impressed by how big the world is and just how much there is to explore. It's kind of crazy. It's also very pretty. There's always things going on. You can just be walking and just see somebody get robbed, or find someone unconscious and nurse them back to health. It starts to feel very small at a certain point, because a lot of the NPCs kind of say the exact same thing. Like a lot of them just want you to go kill someone who robbed them. Currently the game is $20, which I don't know if I'd say is worth it, but if you do want to try, maybe wait till it goes on sale. The next game I played is Ex-Zodiac, which is a low poly, fast paced rail shooter. It reminds me of something like Star Fox or 3D Galactica. You're basically in a spaceship dodging obstacles and trying to shoot at the enemies. The first time I played this game, I was lost. I was lost as hell. I didn't know what was going on. But once I got the hang of it, I started improving slowly. On my first level, I got a D, then a C, then a B, and on the next one, I got an E. Because of this Tiki bitch, man. He's so hard to beat. Yeah, no, I think this game is great. The music is good, the level designs are so cool. Each one is visually distinct from the next, and there's a water level, Gotta give it extra points for that. Now, I don't know if I'm dumb, but I found this game pretty hard. I don't think I beat any level on my first try, but it might just be a skill issue and the fact that I've never really played a game like this before. My only complaint would be that in order to lock on to targets, you have to hold down the shoot button. But that means if you just want to constantly shoot, you kind of have to mash it. And I think that does feel kind of clunky at times. But overall, this game's very solid, very good. I think you should definitely check it out. And that is the last game. So what did I find out by doing this? Steam has good games and bad games, and sometimes those games are next to each other. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.